In the brutal Montana winters of the 1880s, frontier families turned freezing cabins into warm sanctuaries using nothing but logs, moss, and hard-won wisdom. Discover the ingenious survival systems that kept them alive when failure meant death before dawn.
The families who lived through frontier winters knew something we've forgotten. They understood how to turn a freezing cabin into a warm sanctuary when the temperature outside plummeted to 40 below zero. They mastered techniques that kept a fire burning for 12 hours straight without modern technology. They created insulation systems that worked as well as anything we have today, using nothing but moss, animal hair, and mud. And when everything went wrong, when the fire died out, when supplies ran low, when blizzards trapped them for weeks, they had emergency protocols that saved lives. In our modern world of central heating, electric blankets, and weather apps, we've lost touch with what it took to actually survive a winter night when failure meant death before dawn. How did these frontier families do it? What engineering marvels did they create out of logs and stone? And why do we know so little about these incredible survival systems that kept our ancestors alive? Tonight, it's the Montana Frontier 1880s. But hold on. Get comfortable first. I mean it. Adjust your pillows. Pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. The first thing that hits you is the cold on your face. Brutal, sharp, like someone slapping you awake. Your eyes snap open to the pre-dawn darkness of a Montana winter morning in 1883. The temperature outside is 30 below zero, and inside the cabin, it's not much warmer. Your nose and cheeks sting from exposure, while the rest of your body remains buried under a pile of quilts, fur, and whatever else the Morrison family could find a layer on the beds. Beside you, your younger siblings are still huddled in sleep, their breath forming tiny clouds that hang in the frigid air. The night's fire has died down to just a few glowing embers barely visible in the cast iron stove across the small cabin. Those embers are life itself. If they've gone out completely during the night, the family is in serious trouble. Thomas Morrison, your father, is already moving. You hear the creak of his bed as he rises, followed by the soft thud of his feet hitting the plank floor. Unlike your warm bed right now, his feet are landing on boards that feel like ice. He doesn't waste time putting on clothes. He sleeps in most of them during winter, but immediately heads for the stove, hunched against the cold, moving with practiced urgency. Sarah, he whispers to your mother, I need light. You can barely make out her shape as she reaches for the bedside table, where a candle and matches wait. The scratch of the match is unnaturally loud in the silent cabin, and for a moment, the tiny flame illuminates her face, tired, determined, with frost caught in her eyelashes. Damn cold, your father mutters, opening the stove door carefully. The hinges creak from the cold, a sound that would normally be annoying, but now serves as confirmation that the metal hasn't cracked in the extreme temperatures. Through narrowed eyes, he examines the coals. You hold your breath. The entire family is about to start their day based on what he sees in that firebox. Still got some life, he says, relief evident in his voice. Hand me the kindling box. This isn't just a casual morning fire. What you're witnessing is the execution of a sophisticated thermal survival system that frontier families perfected through brutal trial and error. Each movement your father makes follows a precise sequence developed over generations. First, he arranges small bone dry splinters of pine kindling that was prepared weeks ago and kept near the stove specifically for this moment. He doesn't just toss them in haphazardly. He built a careful structure over the coals, creating space for airflow while ensuring the smallest pieces make direct contact with the embers. This kindling's down to the last handful, he says. John, we'll need to cut more today. That's you. At 12 years old, you're old enough to help with the critical fire management tasks. You nod though he can't see you in the dark. The kindling has to be perfect. Too thick and it won't catch from the coals. Too thin and it will burn up before igniting the larger pieces. Your father leans down, puts his face near the stove opening, and gently blows on the coals. Not hard puffs like you might imagine, but long, steady breaths that provide just enough oxygen to bring the embers back to life without dispersing their heat. It's a skill that took him years to master. The technique works. A small flame appears, tentatively licking at the kindling. He adds slightly larger pieces now, angling them to create a miniature log cabin structure that maximizes airflow. The fire begins to grow. Emma, check the water bucket, your mother says to your older sister. Emma slides reluctantly from under the covers, grabbing a shawl to wrap around her night clothes. She moves to the corner where a bucket sits on a small table and reaches in. Frozen solid, she reports, tapping the ice surface all the way through. Your mother sighs. We'll need to melt snow again. She gets up now, too, the bed creaking as her weight leaves it. The younger children, your two little brothers and baby sister, remain bundled together, generating precious shared body heat. At ages 6, 4, and 2, they'll be kept in bed as long as possible this morning. Fist-sized rocks collected from the creek bed in summer are kept near the stove. Throughout the day, they absorb heat from the fire. At night, they're wrapped in rags and placed in the beds, providing hours of gentle warmth. You select 4 stones from beside the stove using a rag to protect your hands from their heat. They're almost too hot to handle, which is perfect. They'll stay warm until midday if properly wrapped. Your mother expertly bundles each stone in several layers of cloth. First, a thin cotton rag that can withstand the direct heat. Then, wool scraps for insulation. Finally, a piece of old blanket to hold it all together. She secures each bundle with twine. Put these in the children's beds, she instructs, one at the foot of each bed under the quilts, but not touching their skin directly. You place the heated stones as directed, carefully tucking them under the covers. Within minutes, the bedding will capture their warmth, creating pockets of heat that will last for hours. The door opens again, and your father returns carrying a wooden crate of chickens. The birds are unusually quiet, subdued by the cold. It's bad out there, he reports, setting the crate in the corner farthest from the sleeping areas. Thermometer on the barn wall broke in the night. Glass shattered from the cold. Your mother looks up sharply. And the cow? She's alive, but shivering badly. I gave her extra feed and stuffed more hay around her. I'll check again in an hour. He stamped his feet, knocking snow from his boots. The well's frozen solid. We'll be melting snow for at least a week, I reckon. This news lands heavily. Melting snow for all water needs. Drinking, cooking, minimal washing requires significant firewood. How's our wood supply looking? Your mother asks, though she already knows the answer. We've got about 8 days' worth inside. Maybe another week's worth in the covered stack by the barn. He removes his coat, hanging it on a peg where the frost on its surface will melt near the stove's heat. We'll need to cut more today. No matter what, the reality of frontier winter survival becomes clear in this moment. There's no rest, no day off, no break from the constant work of staying alive. Every day requires specific critical tasks that cannot be postponed. Your father sits at the table now, quickly eating his cornmeal mush, which has already cooled considerably in the brief time he was outside. He doesn't complain. Cold food is just another reality of winter life. John and I will head out to cut wood as soon as it's fully light, he says between bites. Emma can help with the barn chores today, since it's too cold for the little ones to go out. At 15, Emma is considered old enough to handle most adult tasks. She nods, though she clearly isn't looking forward to venturing into the killing cold. I'll need to repack the snow banked against the north wall, your father continues. It's drifted away, and I can feel the draft coming through. The snowbank is another ingenious part of frontier insulation systems. Piling snow against the cabin walls creates an additional barrier against the wind and helps insulate the structure, but it requires constant maintenance, especially after windy nights. What about the ice on the roof? Your mother asks. Is it building up near the chimney again? Your father nods grimly. I'll have to clear it before we go for wood. Can't risk it melting and damming up if we get a warm spell. Ice dams are a serious threat to cabin survival. If snow on the roof melts from chimney heat, then refreezes at the edges, it can create a dam that traps more snow melt, eventually forcing water under the shingles and into the cabin. A leaking roof in winter could be catastrophic. The sky outside is lightening now, the darkness giving way to a gray dawn. The temperature will rise slightly with the sun, perhaps to -20 if you're lucky, making outdoor work marginally less dangerous. Your father finishes his breakfast and stands already planning the day's critical tasks in his mind. John, get your warmest clothes on. We'll start with the roof ice. Then check the animals again. Then head to the woodlot. You nod knowing what's ahead. Hours of exhausting, freezing work that must be done perfectly despite numbed fingers and the constant threat of frostbite. There's no room for complaints, no space for weakness. Winter survival demands everything. As you pull on your second pair of wool socks, you glance at the window. The oiled paper glows with the first real light of dawn, illuminating the frost patterns that have formed on its surface overnight. Delicate crystalline structures, beautiful and deadly. At least it's not snowing, you think, searching for any positive aspect to the day ahead. Your father reads your thoughts. Storm's coming, though, he says, looking toward the same window. I can feel it in my bones. We've got maybe 6 hours before it hits. 6 hours to cut enough wood to survive what might be days of blizzard conditions. 6 hours to secure animals, check the cabin's insulation, prepare for the worst. Just another winter day on the Montana frontier, where every sunrise is a victory and every successfully managed fire is the difference between life and death. And somewhere in the back of your mind, as you prepare to face the deadly cold, you wonder how many more winters your family can survive like this. How many more mornings of frozen water and desperate fire starting? How many more days of constant life or death labor? But there's no time for such thoughts now. The fire is burning. The cabin is warming. And there's work to be done. Survival work. The kind our ancestors mastered and we've forgotten. In your comfortable modern bed, you should be thankful that bedroom thermometer reading 68 degrees. The pioneers would have considered that a miracle beyond imagination. You step outside behind your father, and the cold steals your breath away. It's the kind of cold that doesn't just make you shiver. It makes you wonder how anything survives out here. The kind that turns your nostril hairs brittle and freezes your eyelashes together if you blink too long. Keep moving, your father says, his voice muffled through his scarf. Standing still is how you die out here. The sun is just cresting the eastern hills, casting long blue shadows across the snow. Despite the sunlight, the temperature remains well below zero. You can tell by how the snow squeaks under your boots. That particular high-pitched sound only happens in the deepest cold. Your father hands you a wooden snow rake, a homemade tool with a long handle and flat wooden blade. Start on the south corner while I check the chimney, he instructs. You begin scraping at the roof edge where dangerous ice dams have formed. It's backbreaking work, reaching up with a heavy rake to pull down accumulated snow and ice. Your fingers, despite 2 pairs of mittens, begin to ache within minutes. On the other side of the cabin, your father has climbed onto a stacked pile of firewood to reach the roof near the chimney. He's breaking away ice with a metal tool, sending shards crashing to the ground. Damn near blocked, he calls over. Another day, and we'd have had smoke backing up inside. This is no exaggeration. A blocked chimney isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially fatal. Smoke filling the cabin could suffocate the family in their sleep or force them outside into killing temperatures. The frontier demanded more than just physical strength. In an untamed land where every movement could either save or doom you, knowledge reigned supreme. How'd he do that? You ask, genuinely curious about the legendary woodcutter who had often been the subject of your grandfather's tales. He understood wood, comes the simple reply. Not just a story about your grandfather, it was a lesson in frontier efficiency. When every calorie burned could mean another meal needed, when every sunlight moment was precious, you learned to work smart. A smart man does half the work of a strong, foolish one. These words etched into your mind as much as they were rooted in the survival of generations. The oak tree in front of you began to creak, signaling the nearing end of your cut. Pressure mounted on the saw as the trunk fought the mechanics of its fall. Careful now, your father warned, the urgency in his voice a reminder of nature's risks. The tree's mass leaned, a dangerous task if underestimated. A misstep could mean a life beneath would heavier than any imagination dared. Back, he commanded as a sharp crack resounded. The oak surrendered, its majestic frame toppling, crashing through branches, sending a tremor through the frozen ground. Fell clean, no branches, your father noted with satisfaction, a nod to precision under his tutelage. Now transformed from one grand life to the parts that would sustain yours. This oak was just one chapter of many in your family's survival story. Let's bucket into stove lengths, he said. The work was intuitive yet exact. 18-inch pieces were the aim. Too long, and you wouldn't gain warmth. Too short, and you'd burn through reserves. Your father shared whispers of the forest as you sawed. Pine for a quick morning blaze. Oak to warm through dinners. Hickory, if we find it, to hold until dawn. He taught you that wood spoke languages in fire. Creosote and its dangers, burning properties and their benefits, were as much tools as steel blades in your hands. The process was methodical. Splitting logs demanded an understanding of grain, a knowledge that dared you to question power. Your father knew the wood's secrets. With strikes and wedges, he revealed the path within each log, a guide to fewer blisters, to an easier load that radiant heat would later release. Fatigue clawed at your body as the hours lumbered by, precious time marked by the march of dark clouds. A meal of cold cornbread and venison kept the cold at bay, little pockets of heat amidst an unforgiving winter. Your father was a teacher in disguise, each lesson a building block for independent survival, a skill honed not in books but through dirt, wood, and fire feeding life within your ribs. It's like a living thing, he said of fire. Feed it, tend it, listen to its needs. The dance between flame and family he illustrated through practice. From chimney health to furniture strategy, each tiny adjustment created places of safety and warmth out of nothing but experience and instinct. Even a baby's cradle had its place, a secret only weathered eyes could plot on empty maps of heat and cold. With wood processed and sled ready, the sky's wrath pushed you back toward the cabin, its gusts promising an impenetrable storm. Your mother's anxious eyes mirrored those of every frontier watched from every window as the swirl of white assured your return. Inside, Emma held court over the fire. Only 15, but with hands and heart forged from necessity, she took pride in her flame mastery. Each crackling ember echoed with promise of life preserved. Stack it, your father directed, wood transferred hand by hand, whispering of survival. With each piece placed, essentials reinforced what the wilderness threatened to unmake. You sat watching while your father noted flaws with sagacious patience. The cold's relentless bite shrinking clay and hair away from logs, a newfound breach against the remains of day. More than just filler, he murmured at your side, not with frustration, but with renewed purpose and invention. You assembled a mix, earth and hair, ash and care, each measuring carefully to create not just a wall's hold, but a life's continuity. The storm bludgeoned outside, its fury a test. Inside simmered survival drawn from hands calloused and minds clear. When windows sealed and warmth trickled back, you understood the silent whispers of fire and wood, for they had spoken, taught, and you had become acutely aware. "We have all we need," he muttered with simple assurance. In your mind's quiet, amidst blizzard echoes, you finally understood. This dance of knowledge, precision, and intuition was your true inheritance, unspoken in words, yet boundless in power. Extra light is needed for precise work, especially near the darker edges of the cabin. Your father applies the chinking mixture with expert hands, pressing it firmly into the gap where the original material has failed. His fingers, rough and cracked from years of such work, smooth the surface with practiced efficiency. "This should hold," he says, stepping back to examine his work, at least until the temperature rises enough for a proper repair. The entire process took less than 15 minutes, but it represents a critical maintenance task that prevents heat loss. In a modern home, a small draft might go unnoticed or be considered a minor inconvenience. In a frontier cabin during a Montana winter, it could be the difference between survival and death. Your father returns to his place by the stove, warming his hands that have cooled during the repair work. The howling of the wind seems to intensify, as if the storm is frustrated by the family's defenses. "Remember the Andersons' place?" he asks, directing the question to your mother. "Winter of '78? She nods grimly. "Poor construction. Walls might as well have been made of cheesecloth." "What happened to them?" Emma asks, leaning forward with curiosity. Your parents exchange a look, silently debating how much to share with the children. Finally, your father speaks. "They didn't make it through February," he says simply. "Found them all huddled together in the corner. Fire had gone out days earlier from what we could tell." The cabin falls silent, except for the crackling of the fire and the storm's persistent howling. The Andersons' tragedy, an entire family frozen to death in their inadequately insulated cabin, serves as a stark reminder of what's at stake. That's why I'm always fussing about proper chinking and insulation, your father continues after a moment. It's not just about comfort. It's life and death out here. Little Michael, who has been quietly playing with wooden blocks near the stove, looks up with wide eyes. "Are we going to freeze too, Papa?" "No, son," your father assures him firmly. "Our cabin is strong and tight. Your mama and I made sure of that when we built it." This is no empty boast. The Morrison cabin represents the culmination of frontier insulation knowledge, techniques developed over generations of harsh winter survival. "Tell us about building the cabin again," William requests, always eager for stories. Your father settles back, warming his hands over the stove. "Well, we didn't just slap some logs together and call it done. That's for certain. What follows is not just a story, but a lesson in frontier construction techniques that have kept your family alive for 6 Montana winters. First thing we did," your father begins, "was choose the right trees. Straight pines 16 to 18 inches thick with minimal taper. Cut them in early spring when the sap was starting to run, but before full flow. Even the timing of harvest for construction logs was precisely calculated. Trees cut at the wrong time might contain too much moisture, leading to excessive shrinkage as they dried or be more susceptible to insect infestation. We peeled the bark right away," he continues, "left them to season through summer, turning them regularly so they dry even." Emma, who's heard this story many times, interjects and you notch them with a specialized cut so they fit tight. Your father nods with approval. "That's right. Saddle notch on the bottom. V-notch on top creates a self-draining joint that sheds water and doesn't collect moisture that could freeze and split the wood." This level of engineering detail in seemingly simple log construction demonstrates the sophistication hidden in frontier building techniques. Each element serves multiple purposes: structural integrity, weather resistance, and thermal efficiency. But the real secret, he continues, was the double wall construction on the north and west sides. This is the innovation your father is most proud of. A technique he learned from an old trapper who had survived 20 winters in the mountains. Standard cabins have single walls. He explained for the benefit of the younger children who might not remember the construction details. But ours has a second inner wall on the sides that take the worst weather. Creates a dead air space between walls. Best insulation there is. The concept of using trapped air as an insulator was understood long before modern fiberglass or foam products. Your father's double wall design created a 4-inch gap between the outer and inner log walls, which was then filled with a mixture of dried moss harvested from the forest floor. Remember gathering all that moss, John? He asks, turning to you with a smile. Must have collected 100 bushels that summer. You do remember weeks spent carefully harvesting the thick, spongy moss that grows abundantly in shaded forest areas. At the time, it seemed like endless, pointless work for a 12-year-old. Only later did you understand how critical that moss insulation would be for winter survival. And the chinking, your mother adds, that was the real work. Indeed, the initial chinking of the cabin represented perhaps the single most labor-intensive part of construction. Every gap between logs, and there were hundreds, had to be stuffed first with smaller material like moss or cloth scraps, then sealed with the clayish hair mixture your father just used for the repair. Took us nearly a month just to do all the walls, your father recalls. Your mother's fingers were raw from working that clay mix. Worth every blister, she replies simply, glancing at the sturdy walls that now protect her family from certain death outside. Sometime in the deep night, you wake to the sound of wood splintering. Your eyes snap open in the darkness. For a moment, disoriented from sleep, you wonder if part of the cabin has collapsed under the storm's assault. Thomas, your mother's urgent voice cuts through the darkness. The fire's almost out. You hear your father's quick movements as he slides from beneath the quilts. The cabin has cooled significantly. You can feel it even under your layers of bedding. Watch for nails, your father warns, his voice calm despite the emergency developing. I'm breaking up the chair now. You understand the splintering sound. With the fire dangerously low and the temperature plummeting, your father has made the split-second decision to sacrifice furniture rather than risk losing the fire completely. The sound of breaking wood continues, followed by the creak of the stove door opening. A faint orange glow briefly illuminates your father's face as he carefully feeds splintered chair parts into the dying fire. This is a critical moment in winter survival. The overnight fire has burned down faster than anticipated, perhaps due to the exceptional cold or a log that didn't burn as expected. If it goes out completely, restarting it will consume precious time and resources, while the cabin temperature could drop to dangerous levels. It's catching. Your father reports with evident relief. John, I need you up. We need more wood from the lean-to. That's you. Despite the biting cold, you slide immediately from beneath your quilts. There's no hesitation, no complaint. When survival is at stake, everyone responds instantly. The cabin air hits you like a physical blow after the warmth of your bed. Your breath forms thick clouds in the darkness as you quickly pull on your boots. You don't bother with additional layers. The trip to the attached lean-to will be brief and movement will generate some warmth. Your father lights a small candle, its flame looking fragile and uncertain in the cold air. By its light, you follow him to the door that connects to the lean-to, a small unheated space attached to the main cabin where additional firewood, tools, and some food supplies are stored. Ready? He asks, his hand on the door latch. It'll be bitter out there. You nod, and he pulls the door open. The blast of cold that rushes and makes the earlier cabin air seem warm by comparison. The lean-to, with its uninsulated walls, has reached equilibrium with the outside temperature, perhaps 30 below zero. Working quickly, guided by the wavering candlelight, you and your father select armloads of wood from the stack supply. Your fingers, exposed to the brutal cold, begin to ache almost immediately. After 30 seconds, they burn. After a minute, they start to go numb. The first warning sign of incipient frostbite. Enough, your father says, noticing your increasingly clumsy movements. Back inside, you return to the main cabin, closing the door firmly behind you. The wood is stacked beside the stove, and your father immediately begins adding pieces to the fire, which has begun to recover thanks to his emergency intervention with the chair. Get those hands near the stove, your mother instructs, now fully awake and moving about the cabin, but not too close. You know the routine. Indeed, you do. Warming dangerously cold extremities requires careful technique. Too much heat too quickly can cause tissue damage as painful as the frostbite itself. You extend your hands toward the stove, keeping them about a foot away from the metal surface that has begun to glow dull red in spots. Your mother approaches with a small tin of bear grease, the frontier equivalent of modern petroleum jelly. "Let me see," she says, taking your hands and examining them critically in the growing firelight. "No whiteness," she pronounces after careful inspection. "Just reddened. You'll be fine." This casual diagnosis masks the seriousness of what's being checked. True frostbite, where skin actually freezes, appears as waxy white patches. It represents tissue death, and in severe cases can lead to the loss of fingers, toes, or even limbs. Frontier families became expert at recognizing its earliest signs and intervening before permanent damage occurred. "Rub this in," she instructs, handing you the tin of grease. "Then put these on." These are heavy mittens knitted from wool and lined with rabbit fur, the most effective hand protection the family possesses. They're normally reserved for long periods outside in the worst weather, but tonight's fire emergency has warranted their use. As you massage the greasy substance into your reddened skin, the burning sensation intensifies briefly, then begins to fade as circulation returns. The bear grease serves multiple purposes, creating a moisture barrier, reducing evaporative cooling, and providing lubrication for skin that becomes dangerously dry in winter conditions. Your father has the stove burning properly now, adding carefully selected pieces to rebuild the coal bed that will provide consistent heat. The immediate crisis is past. "That was close," he mutters, more to himself than anyone else. Too close. Even with all their knowledge and preparation, the Morrison family has just experienced how quickly a winter situation can become dangerous. A fire burning down faster than expected during the night represents one of the most common threats to frontier survival. By now, everyone in the cabin is awake. Emma has taken charge of the younger children, helping them pull their bedding closer to the stove where it's warmest. Even in emergency situations, the family operates with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role. Every 30 minutes, as instructed, you add precisely 2 pieces of wood to the fire, selecting each for its burning properties and positioning it carefully for optimal heat production. Between these critical fire-tending moments, you and Emma talk quietly, sharing the kind of conversations that only happen in the deep stillness of winter nights. As the first hint of dawn lightens the cabin's interior, your father emerges from a body heat shelter. Despite the circumstances, he looks surprisingly rested. "Made it through another one," he says with simple satisfaction, moving to the stove to check your fire management work. "Good job maintaining the coal bed." This small praise, acknowledgement of properly executed survival skills, carries more weight than elaborate compliments might in another context. Your mother joins him, and together they begin the process of dismantling the body heat shelter and returning the cabin to its daytime configuration. The younger children, still bundled in multiple layers, remain asleep on their bedding, now arranged near the stove. Storm's breaking, your father announces after briefly pulling aside a window, covering to glance outside. Winds dropping and skies lightening to the east. This news brings palpable relief. A blizzard's end means the most acute danger has passed, though the extreme cold will likely remain for days. As full daylight arrives, the family begins its morning routine, albeit with adjustments for the exceptional cold. The water bucket, despite being kept near the stove overnight, has a thick crust of ice that must be broken before morning washing can begin. 43 below on the north wall thermometer, your father reports, after checking the instrument mounted outside a small window. Never seen it that cold this early in January. Yet, despite this record-breaking temperature, the Morrison family has survived the night comfortably, not by modern standards of comfort perhaps, but without danger or significant hardship. Their layered approach to cold protection, from cabin construction to fire management to clothing strategies to the body heat shelter, has proven equal to even this extreme challenge. As you help prepare the morning meal, you realize that what your family accomplished last night wasn't just survival. It was the application of sophisticated thermal engineering developed through generations of hard-won knowledge. Systems so effective that even in conditions that would kill unprotected humans in minutes, your family slept safely through the night. This is the forgotten science of frontier winter survival, not just enduring the cold, but mastering it through integrated systems of protection that modern technology has largely rendered obsolete, but which once meant the difference between life and death on the American frontier. 3 days after the blizzard, the brutal cold still grips the valley, but the skies have cleared to a crystalline blue that almost hurts to look at. The sun shines with blinding intensity over a transformed landscape, snow sculpted into otherworldly shapes by the wind, ice crystals hanging from every tree branch. The world frozen into a deadly beauty. Your father stands in the doorway of the cabin, surveying the scene with a practiced eye. Need to check on the neighbors, he announces. McClintocks haven't got enough experience for cold like this. Is it safe? Your mother asks, concern evident in her voice. He nods. Winds died completely. Cold still dangerous, but manageable if we're prepared. He turns to you. John, you're coming with me. 2 is safer than 1 in these conditions. This isn't a request, but a statement of fact. At 12, you're considered old enough to participate in community welfare checks. Bundle up properly, your mother instructs, already gathering your heaviest outdoor gear. Full layers, no shortcuts. The preparations for venturing outdoors in 40 below temperatures are elaborate and methodical. First comes the base layer of wool undergarments, then a middle layer of flannel, followed by heavy wool pants and shirt. Over this goes a buckskin vest lined with rabbit fur. And finally, a heavy canvas coat with a hood lined with bear fur. Your feet receive special attention. First, a layer of thin cotton socks. The rare appropriate use of cotton in winter as they wick moisture away from the skin.